They say you should never reveal all your cards at once. For 8 long years, I've lived by that rule, letting everyone think I was a struggling nobody. Even my wife, Chloe, the woman I thought I loved, had no idea who I really was. And that night, sitting on the corner of our leather sectional and sipping a glass of water like I didn't have a care in the world, I let them laugh. Chloe, with her flawless curls and that gleaming pearl necklace I bought her, was in her element. She loved playing hostess, especially to her circle of friends. Well, I called them her entourage. They were the type who'd wear designer dresses to a backyard barbecue just to outshine one another. And tonight, they'd found their entertainment for the evening. Me. Liam, sweetheart, Chloe cooed, her tones syrupy sweet but laced with the kind of venom only she could muster. Why don't you tell them about your latest job hunt? The room erupted in laughter before I could even open my mouth. It wasn't the first time she'd done this, used me as the punchline to her jokes. But tonight, she was really going for it. Maybe the new champagne had given her courage. Her best friend, Jessica, chimed in next. Honestly, Chloe, you're so patient. If my husband couldn't hold a steady job, I don't know what I'd do. I mean, it's not like Liam is even trying, right? She gave me a look that could cut glass, and I forced a weak smile. That's the thing about playing a role. You have to commit, even when it stings inside. I wanted to laugh in their faces, to tell Jessica that her position as head of marketing was courtesy of me. I could see the resignation letter sitting in my drafts folder with her name on it. But I didn't. Not yet. Chloe leaned back, swirling her wine. Oh, Jessica, don't be too hard on him. At least he knows his way around the kitchen. The man makes a mean spaghetti, and someone has to do the dishes around here. More laughter. Even the husbands joined in, their chuckles bouncing off the vaulted ceilings of the house I paid for, the house they thought belonged to Chloe, courtesy of her supposed financial contributions. Funny how none of them noticed the cracks in her story. Did they think her part-time charity work funded this marble-floored palace or the luxury cars parked out front? No, but they believed what they wanted to believe. Because it was easier, and I let them. Chloe wasn't done yet, though. Remember that one time Liam thought he could be a consultant? Oh, darling, you spent months preparing for that interview, didn't you? What was the company called again? Oh, right, Apex Dynamics. They didn't even call him back. She erupted into laughter, clutching her sides like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. That one hit close. She didn't know it, but that interview wasn't what she thought it had been. It was my routine quarterly check-in, an undercover review to ensure my managers were doing their jobs. I sat across the table from my own hiring team that day, silently judging them while they judged me. It was my way of keeping things in check. And now, my own wife had turned that into a joke. The rest of the night passed in a blur of cruel remarks, shared glances, and clinking glasses. They didn't see the way my grip tightened around my drink or notice the fire building behind my calm expression. That's the funny thing about people like them. They assume the quiet ones are weak. But weakness isn't silence. Weakness is thinking your throne is secure when it's built on lies. Eventually, Chloe waved me off to the kitchen. Be a dear and get us another bottle, won't you? I stood and did as she asked, my face a mask of quiet submission. But as I walked away, I caught the words she whispered to Jessica. Honestly, I don't know how much longer I can do this. A man without ambition is just embarrassing. Embarrassing. That's what she called me. I felt the heat rising in my chest, but I swallowed it down. That night wasn't about reacting. It was about remembering. Every word they said, every laugh they shared, was fuel for what was to come. As I stood in the kitchen uncorking another bottle of champagne I bought, I glanced at the clock. It was 9:47 p.m., less than 12 hours until the board meeting, less than 12 hours until their world came crashing down. Let them laugh tonight, I thought, because tomorrow none of them will have anything to laugh about. I returned to the living room, placing the bottle on the coffee table like a dutiful husband. Chloe barely acknowledged me, too busy telling the room about her latest spa day. I sat back down, taking my place in the corner, invisible and insignificant in their eyes. But inside, I was smiling. Let them mock me. Let them think I'm nothing. Because when the clock strikes 9 the next morning, they'll learn the truth. The man they belittled wasn't just their equal, he was their boss. The morning of the reckoning began like any other, but for me, it was far from ordinary. The house was eerily quiet as I dressed in a tailored navy suit, one of the few indulgences I kept tucked away for occasions like this. Chloe was still asleep, her careless confidence evident in the way she sprawled across the bed, oblivious to what was coming. For years, I'd let her believe she was in control, but today I was taking it all back. At exactly 6 a.m., I left the house, stepping into a black town car waiting outside. My driver, Charles, nodded as I slid into the back seat. He didn't ask questions, he never did. But there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes when he noticed my unusually polished demeanor. "To Apex headquarters," I said, simply. He nodded and pulled away, the hum of the engine steadying my nerves. My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, my most trusted executive and one of the few people who knew the truth about me. Sarah, boardroom ready, security briefed, documentation finalized. Me, perfect. Be sure the legal team is on standby. They've been briefed. Good luck. Luck wasn't a factor anymore. Everything had been meticulously planned, every detail accounted for. I leaned back in my seat, watching the city wake up around me. It was almost poetic, the world going about its business, unaware that in a few hours, 5 people's lives would be irreversibly changed. When I arrived at the office, I entered through the private service entrance. It was one of many perks that came with being the CEO of Apex Dynamics, though no one had ever seen me use it. That's how I liked it, staying in the shadows, observing from a distance, letting my carefully chosen executives think they were running the show. But today, I wasn't staying in the shadows. Sarah was waiting for me in the security office. She handed me a visitor's badge with a faint smirk. David Miller, it read, the fake name I used whenever I needed to go undercover within my own company. "Everything is set," she said, motioning to the monitors displaying live feeds from various parts of the building. "Your wife's friends are already here. Morning meetings are underway." I glanced at the screens, watching as Jessica, Angela, Mark, and Stephen arrived one by one, laughing and chatting as if it were just another day. They had no idea what awaited them. "Make sure the security team knows not to intervene unless instructed," I said. "I don't want any disruptions." Sarah nodded, understood. "What about your wife, Chloe?" My stomach tightened at the thought of her. She wasn't part of the corporate takedown, not directly. But what I had planned for her was just as thorough. "She'll know soon enough," I said, brushing off the thought. "Focus on the task at hand." At precisely 8:45 a.m., I took my position in the lobby, dressed in my unremarkable disguise. I watched as the day's players arrived. Jessica was first, her head held high, barking orders into her phone. Angela followed closely behind, pausing to greet the receptionist with a hollow smile. Mark and Stephen arrived together, laughing about a round of golf they'd played the weekend before. They didn't notice me sitting there, flipping through a copy of Apex's annual report like a nervous job candidate. That was the beauty of staying invisible. They never looked twice. At 9 a.m. sharp, I made my way to the HR floor for my interview. It was a charade, of course, a test of how deeply the rot had spread. I wanted to see firsthand how my own hiring process had been corrupted under their leadership. Thomas, the HR representative, greeted me with a thin smile, clearly disinterested. "This will be a quick assessment," he said, leading me into a small conference room. "Just a few basic skills tests and a short interview." The skills test was almost laughable in its simplicity. I made intentional errors, fumbling with questions I could have answered in my sleep. Through the glass walls, I saw Jessica walking by, glancing into the room with a look of mild disdain. She didn't recognize me, of course. To her, I was just another nobody wasting her company's time. Thomas reviewed my work with a barely concealed smirk. "Well," he said, his tone condescending, "this is interesting. Let's move on to the interview." The panel interview was worse. 3 middle managers sat across from me, their expressions dripping with boredom. They fired off generic questions, barely listening to my answers. At one point, one of them leaned back in his chair and checked his phone mid-sentence. By the time it ended, I had more than enough evidence. The culture they had cultivated was rotten to its core. Dismissive, arrogant, and completely detached from the values Apex Dynamics was built on. At 10:15 a.m., I made my way to the executive conference room. It was time for the main event. Through the partially open door, I could hear them laughing, their voices carrying the same smug tone I'd endured the night before. "You should have seen her face during the interview," Jessica was saying. "She looked like she hadn't touched a computer in years." "Oh, that's classic," Angela replied, her voice thick with amusement. "No wonder HR keeps rejecting people. Where do these applicants even come from?" My hand tightened on the doorknob, but I didn't hesitate. I stepped into the room, letting the door close behind me with a soft click. Their laughter died instantly as they turned to face me. I could see the confusion in their eyes, the flicker of recognition as they tried to place me. "Actually," I said, my voice steady and deliberate, "I think it's time we had a real conversation." Jessica blinked, her brow furrowing. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" I smiled, taking a seat at the head of the table, the seat that had always been mine. "I'm Liam Carter," I said, "CEO of Apex Dynamics, and as of this morning, your boss." The room fell silent, their faces a mix of shock, disbelief, and fear. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of my words sink in. Let's begin. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. Jessica's confident smirk faltered first, giving way to confusion and then panic. Angela looked as if she'd seen a ghost, while Mark and Stephen sat frozen, their bravado evaporating as realization crept in. I let the tension build, savoring the moment. They didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or beg for forgiveness. Jessica recovered first, or at least tried to. "Is this some kind of joke?" she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You, the CEO? That's impossible." "Impossible?" I leaned forward, folding my hands on the table. "Jessica, you've worked at this company for 6 years, and in all that time, you've never thought to question who signs your paychecks? You never bothered to wonder who approved your promotions or overlooked your creative accounting practices? But let me assure you, it's not only possible, it's the truth." I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. Instantly, the monitors on the walls flickered to life, displaying Apex Dynamics' original incorporation documents. There, in bold print, was my name, Liam Carter, founder and CEO. Beneath it was my photo, a younger version of me, smiling confidently. The same man who now sat at the head of the table, watching their world crumble. "I built this company from the ground up," I said, my voice steady but sharp. long before any of you were here. Every policy, every division, every success you've taken credit for, it all started with me." Angela's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. But, a nobody?" I finished for her. "A man who couldn't even land an entry-level position? That's what you all thought, isn't it? That I was just Chloe's failure of a husband clinging to the scraps of her so-called success?" Mark finally found his voice, though it was shaky at best. This has to be a mistake. There's no way you've been running things. We would have known." "Would you?" I raised an eyebrow, tapping my phone again. The monitors now displayed a series of emails, financial reports, and surveillance footage. Each file was damning, a testament to their years of misconduct. You were too busy inflating sales figures, covering up harassment complaints, and funneling company money into your personal accounts to notice who was really in charge. Stephen, usually the loudest of the group, sat pale and silent. I turned my attention to him. "Stephen, tell me, how's your golf game? Still playing on company time, using the Apex corporate card to cover your rounds?" His jaw dropped, but no words came out. "And Mark," I continued, turning to the man next to him, "those quarterly sales bonuses you've been bragging about at every dinner party, they're based on fraudulent reports. I have every fabricated number right here. Would you like me to show the board?" Mark slumped in his chair, his hands covering his face. Angela tried a different tactic. "Look, Liam, Mr. Carter, this has been a misunderstanding. I've always respected you, I mean, the company, and if there's anything we can do to fix this—" I cut her off with a cold smile. "Fix it? Angela, you've spent years burying complaints, silencing employees, and fostering a toxic culture. You didn't respect anything except your own comfort." Jessica, ever the opportunist, leaned forward, her tone pleading. "Liam, we didn't know. If we'd known—" "You never would have mocked me?" I said, my voice rising slightly. "Laughed at me, treated me like dirt in my own house?" I stood, planting my hands firmly on the table. "Ignorance isn't an excuse. You didn't know because you didn't care to know. You thought I was beneath you, and now you'll face the consequences." I tapped my phone one last time, and the screen behind me changed again. This time, it displayed their termination letters, each one signed and dated, effective immediately. "You're all fired. Your access to company accounts and systems has been revoked. Security is waiting outside to escort you off the premises." "No, no, no," Mark muttered, shaking his head. "You can't do this." I locked eyes with him. I just did. Angela stood abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor. "This is outrageous! We'll sue!" "Sue?" I snapped, cutting her off. "Sue me for firing you with cause? For exposing the fraud, the theft, the harassment you've swept under the rug? Be my guest, Angela, but I promise you I have more evidence than you have excuses." The door opened and 2 security guards stepped inside. "Take them to HR for their exit interviews," I said, my tone icy. "Make sure they understand the terms of their severance, or lack thereof." One by one they stood, their confidence shattered. Jessica glared at me as if her anger could undo everything. Angela looked like she was holding back tears. Mark and Stephen shuffled out without a word, their heads hanging low. Just as they reached the door, I called out, "Oh, and one more thing." They turned to face me, hope flickering in their eyes. "Don't bother reaching out to competitors. Your non-compete agreements are still in effect. And trust me, I'll be watching." The guards escorted them out, and the door closed behind them with a satisfying finality. For a moment, the room was silent again. I let out a slow breath, the weight of years lifting off my shoulders. Sarah entered moments later, her tablet in hand. "Well," she said, her tone neutral but her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Good," I replied, straightening my suit. "Now let's prepare for the board meeting. There's still work to do." As I walked out of the room, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, I wasn't just the man behind the scenes. I was Liam Carter, CEO of Apex Dynamics, and I had just reminded them all exactly who I was.
I don't think anyone truly understands the satisfaction of watching the mighty fall until it's their hand holding the lever. As I walked back to my private office, I replayed the looks on their faces in my mind. Jessica, Angela, Mark, Stephen, they thought they were invincible, untouchable. But I'd torn away their illusions in a matter of minutes, and now it was time for the aftermath. Sarah was already waiting for me when I arrived, her tablet filled with updates and reports. "The termination process is underway," she said, her tone brisk but professional. "HR is processing their files, and security is clearing their offices. Jessica tried to call someone from the marketing team on her way out, but we've already disabled her phone and email access." I nodded, sitting behind my desk. "Good. Make sure all communications are monitored. I don't want any attempts to leak information or contact clients." "Already done," Sarah replied. "And one more thing. Angela demanded to see the board before she left. She claims she's being wrongfully terminated." I smirked, leaning back in my chair. Wrongful termination? Angela covered up harassment cases, manipulated HR records, and created a culture of fear. Let her try to spin that. I doubt the board will be sympathetic. Sarah smiled faintly, a rare crack in her usually stoic demeanor. "I didn't think so, but I figured I'd let you know." By noon, the fallout was well underway. Security cameras showed Jessica pacing the parking lot, shouting into her phone. Mark sat slumped on the curb, staring at the ground. Stephen had already left, his face pale and his shoulders hunched as he walked toward his car. Angela, of course, had been escorted out kicking and screaming, her righteous indignation falling on deaf ears. It was a fitting end for people who had spent years wielding their power to tear others down. And the best part? They still didn't fully understand the scope of what I had done. I pulled up my laptop and opened the live feeds from their exit interviews. Each one was being recorded, of course, for legal purposes. Jessica sat across from the HR representative, her voice tight with anger as she tried to negotiate her severance. "This is ridiculous," she said, slamming her hand on the table. "I've been with this company for years. You can't just fire me." The HR representative didn't flinch. "Your termination is for cause. Per your contract, you forfeit severance and stock options under these circumstances. The documentation is all here." Jessica's face turned red as she flipped through the file in front of her. "This is absurd! Cause? What cause?" "Fraudulent expense reports," the representative said, her voice steady. "Unauthorized use of company funds. Gross misconduct." Jessica leaned back in her chair, shaking her head. "This isn't over," she muttered. Oh, but it was. Mark's interview was next. He didn't argue as much as Jessica, but his desperation was just as evident. "Look, I know I've made mistakes," he said, his voice low. "But you don't have to do this. I've got a family to support." The HR representative gave him the same calm explanation. "Your termination is for cause. You will not receive severance or stock options." He hung his head, muttering under his breath, "This can't be happening." Angela was the last. True to form, she came in swinging. "This is discrimination," she shouted, pointing a finger at the HR representative. "You can't do this to me. I've done nothing wrong."
The representative remained unfazed. We have extensive documentation of your actions, including emails, recorded conversations, and witness testimonies. You were complicit in covering up harassment complaints and retaliating against employees who came forward. That is grounds for immediate termination. Angela sputtered, her indignation turning into disbelief. I want to speak to Liam." The representative glanced at the camera, then back at Angela. "Mr. Carter has already approved this termination. The decision is final." By the time their interviews were over, their access had been revoked, their emails archived, and their personal belongings packed up and delivered to their cars. Sarah confirmed the process had gone smoothly. "They're officially out," she said, placing her tablet on my desk. "The office feels lighter already." I smiled. It's amazing how much dead weight can drag a place down. But the day wasn't over yet. There was still one more person who needed to face the consequences: Chloe. At 1:30 p.m., just as I was reviewing the final reports from HR, my phone buzzed. It was Chloe. Her name flashing on the screen brought a mix of emotions: anger, disappointment, and, oddly enough, relief. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I let it ring for a few seconds before answering. "Hello?" "Liam," she snapped, her voice sharp and impatient. "What the hell is going on? Jessica just called me. She said you fired her and half the executive team. Is this some kind of joke?" "No joke," I said calmly. "Jessica, Angela, Mark, and Stephen were all terminated this morning. It was a long time coming." There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. "You can't do that," she said finally, her voice trembling. "They're your employees, my friends. You had no right." "No right?" I leaned back in my chair, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at my lips. "Chloe, I own the company. I have every right." Her sharp intake of breath was almost satisfying. "What? What are you talking about?" "For 8 years, I've let you believe I was just some aimless, unemployed husband. But the truth is, I built Apex Dynamics from the ground up. Every decision, every success, every dollar you've spent came from me. And now I've finally taken out the trash." "You lied to me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No," I said coldly. "You lied to yourself. And now you're about to see what the truth finally comes out." I hung up, leaving her in stunned silence. There was more to say, much more, but that conversation could wait for now. I had a company to run. When Chloe stormed into the Apex Dynamics headquarters later that afternoon, the receptionist didn't even have time to stop her. She marched past the front desk and headed straight for the executive suite, her heels clicking angrily against the polished floors. I was waiting for her, seated calmly at my desk, reviewing the final files from the day's terminations. The door burst open, and there she was, my wife, looking every bit the picture of indignation. Her perfectly styled hair, her designer handbag swinging in her hand, and the fury in her eyes might have intimidated someone else, not me. "Liam," she said, her voice sharp and demanding, "what in the world is going on?" I didn't look up immediately. I took my time finishing the last line of a report before closing the folder and setting it neatly on my desk. When I finally met her gaze, I spoke with deliberate calmness. "Good afternoon, Chloe. What brings you here?" "What brings me here?" she repeated, her voice rising. "I just got a call from Jessica, crying hysterically, telling me you fired her and Angela and Mark and Stephen. You've lost your mind." I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. Have I? Or have I finally decided to clean up the mess they've made of my company? Chloe blinked, caught off guard by the words. "Your company?" she scoffed, shaking her head. "What are you talking about? Apex isn't yours." "It is," I said, my voice steady. "It always has been." For a moment she was silent, the weight of my statement sinking in. Then she laughed, a bitter, disbelieving sound. This is some kind of joke, right? You're trying to, what, scare me? Humiliate me? I stood, walking around the desk and stopping just a few feet from her. Do you remember the house we live in, Chloe? The one you've always called our home? I paid for it outright. And the cars, the trips, the charity galas? You thought your part-time work covered all that? No. Every luxury you've ever flaunted was funded by Apex Dynamics, my company. Her face paled and her hand tightened around her handbag. You're lying. Am I? I walked back to my desk and tapped a button on my laptop. The monitor on the wall behind me lit up, displaying the incorporation documents for Apex Dynamics, complete with my name as founder and CEO. You've been living off my success for years, Chloe, and while you were busy mocking me, I was busy building an empire. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. You lied to me, she finally whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't lie, I said coldly. I let you believe what you wanted to believe. You saw what you wanted to see, a man you could pity, control, and belittle. You never once stopped to question why everything seemed to come so easily, why the bills were always paid, or why your lifestyle never matched what you thought we could afford. You never cared enough to dig deeper. Her eyes filled with tears, not of remorse, but of anger. You humiliated me in front of my friends. You destroyed them. I raised an eyebrow. Destroyed them? No, Chloe. They destroyed themselves. Jessica was stealing from the company. Angela covered up harassment complaints. Mark falsified sales figures, and Stephen leaked proprietary information to competitors. They weren't your friends. They were parasites, just like you. The word hit her like a slap, and for a moment I thought she might scream. Instead, she straightened her spine, trying to reclaim some shred of dignity. You've gone too far, Liam, she said, her voice icy. You think you can just humiliate me like this? You'll regret it. I let out a short laugh. Regret it? Chloe, for years I've endured your mockery, your condescension, and your utter lack of respect. You made me the punchline of your jokes, parading me around as a failure while you basked in a life I built. The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. Her anger boiled over then. You can't do this to me, she hissed. We're married. I'm entitled to half of everything. I walked back to my desk, opened another folder, and pulled out a stack of papers. I placed them on the table between us and slid them toward her. That's where you're wrong. You signed a prenuptial agreement when we got married. It ensures that everything I built before and during our marriage remains mine. Your entitlement ends today. She stared at the papers, her hands trembling. You're divorcing me? She whispered. I am, I said without hesitation. And before you even think about contesting it, know this. I've already spoken to the best divorce attorneys in the city. None of them will take your case. Your access to the joint account has been revoked, and your spending spree stops now. Her face crumpled as the reality of her situation set in. Liam, please, she said, her voice breaking. I held up a hand, cutting her off. Save it. Your crocodile tears won't work on me anymore, Chloe. For years, I gave you everything, more than you deserved, and you repaid me with mockery and betrayal. I'm done. She stood there, stunned and silent, as I opened the door. Security will escort you out, I said, motioning to the 2 guards waiting outside. Take whatever dignity you have left and leave. Liam, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Goodbye, Chloe, I said, turning back to my desk. And good luck. You'll need it. As the door closed behind her, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in years, I was free from her manipulations, her lies, and her cruelty. I had reclaimed my life, my company, and my self-respect. Chloe's downfall wasn't just the end of a toxic marriage. It was the beginning of a new chapter for me. And as I sat back in my chair, watching the sunset over the city skyline, I knew that this was only the start. The day after Chloe's departure, the atmosphere at Apex Dynamics was electric. The toxic fog that had lingered for years was gone, replaced by a sense of hope and renewal. As I walked into the office that morning, employees stopped to greet me, not with the stiff politeness reserved for their supposed CEO's husband, but with genuine smiles and nods of respect. For the first time, they were seeing me for who I truly was, the man who had built this company from nothing. Sarah met me at my office, her ever-present tablet in hand. "We finalized the reorganization plans," she said, her voice steady but with a hint of excitement. "The departments affected by Jessica, Angela, Mark, and Stephen are already seeing improvements. Productivity is up 25% in some areas." "Good, good," I replied, taking the tablet from her and scanning the data. "What about the employees who left because of them? Any word?" "We've reached out to everyone who filed complaints or resigned due to harassment or discrimination," Sarah said. 12 have already accepted reinstatement offers. The others are considering it." "Make sure they know they'll be walking into a very different environment," I said. "I want them to feel safe here, valued." Sarah nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Understood." That afternoon, I held an all-hands meeting in the main auditorium, a first for me. For years, I had avoided the spotlight, preferring to work behind the scenes. But now, it was time to step forward and address the people who had kept Apex Dynamics running, even under the shadow of corruption. As I stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. Hundreds of faces turned toward me, their expressions a mix of curiosity and anticipation. I gripped the edges of the podium, taking a moment to steady myself before speaking. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice carrying easily through the microphone. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Liam Carter. I'm the founder and CEO of Apex Dynamics." A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd, but I continued. "Over the past several years, I've stayed in the background, observing how this company has grown and changed. And while I've seen incredible talent and innovation, I've also seen things that deeply disappointed me. A culture of fear, favoritism, and dishonesty took root here, and I take responsibility for not addressing it sooner." The room was completely silent now, every pair of eyes fixed on me. "But that ends today," I said firmly. "The people responsible for that culture are gone. And moving forward, this company will be a place where everyone, regardless of their position, feels valued, respected, and empowered." I outlined our new initiatives, anonymous feedback channels, enhanced HR protocols, and mentorship programs for employees who wanted to grow within the company. I spoke about accountability and collaboration, about building a culture of trust and innovation. And when I finished, the room erupted into applause. For the first time in years, I felt proud, not just of what I had built, but of what it was becoming. Over the next few months, the transformation was remarkable. Departments that had been bogged down by inefficiency and favoritism began to thrive. Jennifer, a brilliant programmer who had left after being sidelined by Jessica, returned to lead our new AI division. Under her leadership, we filed 5 patents in 6 months, more than the company had in the past 3 years. The Thompson account, one of our largest clients, doubled their contract with us, citing our new leadership and transparency initiatives as key factors. Other clients followed suit, and our revenue soared. But the most rewarding part wasn't the financial success. It was seeing the employees flourish. People who had once been afraid to speak up now shared ideas openly. Collaboration replaced competition, and for the first time, Apex Dynamics felt like the company I had always envisioned.
As for Chloe and her friends, their downfall was swift and brutal. The evidence I had gathered against them was airtight, leaving no room for retaliation. Jessica and Angela's reputations were in tatters, their misconduct exposed to every potential employer. Mark and Stephen faced lawsuits for fraud and breach of contract, their careers effectively over. Chloe, meanwhile, had retreated into silence. She moved out of the house within a week of our confrontation, her pride too wounded to fight me in court. The divorce was finalized quickly thanks to the ironclad prenuptial agreement. I later heard she was staying with her sister, trying to piece together a life that didn't revolve around appearances and materialism. For a while, I thought about her often, not with anger, but with a strange sense of relief. In the end, she had done me a favor. Her betrayal had forced me to confront the cracks in my life and take back control, and for that, I was grateful. 6 months after the shakeup, I stood in my office, looking out over the city. The skyline was painted in hues of gold and orange as the sun set, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. Sarah knocked lightly on the door before stepping in. "Final numbers are in," she said, handing me a report. "Profits are up 60%. Employee satisfaction is at an all-time high, and the mentorship program has a waiting list." I smiled, setting the report down. It's amazing what people can accomplish when you get rid of the dead weight. Sarah chuckled softly. "There's one more thing," she said. "The press is still asking for an interview. They want to know how you managed to pull off such a perfect transformation." I shook my head. "Let the results speak for themselves. I'm not interested in publicity." She nodded, turning to leave, but paused at the door. "Any regrets?" she asked, her tone softer than usual. I thought about it for a moment, about Chloe's mockery, the betrayal of her friends, and the years I had spent hiding in the shadows. But then I thought about the company we had rebuilt, the people who were thriving, and the future that lay ahead. "No," I said finally. "No regrets, just lessons." In the end, revenge wasn't about destroying what was broken. It was about rebuilding something better. And as I stood there, watching the city lights flicker on one by one, I knew that Apex Dynamics wasn't just a company anymore. It was a symbol of resilience, redemption, and the power of starting over. And I was ready for whatever came next.